Hello world, Lisa Friedrichsen, your friend and computer science professor with another short screencast about JavaScript. We're going to continue our JavaScript Functions 101 lesson. In the previous screencast in this playlist, we talked about why do we create and use functions in the first place. Name and document statements, to be able to reuse those statements by running the function again, and to protect statements from executing immediately. The next step in our journey about JavaScript functions is to determine what functions look like, because there are many different ways they appear, and that can be a really confusing thing. First of all, you generally learn about the function declaration syntax. And syntax in any language, in any programming language, is simply rules, the grammar by which the code is written. When you write a function, one of the most common ways, and generally the first way you learn how to write functions, is by using the function keyword, followed by the function name, followed by parentheses when you're defining the function. Any parameters that that function needs to execute go inside the parentheses. In this case, we're working with functions that don't need parameters. We'll hit that later. And then inside the curly braces, which are also part of the syntax, you put the statements that you want that function to run. So all of these pieces, the function keyword, the parentheses, the curly braces, the semicolon that ends each individual statement, equal sign assignment statement, all those are pieces of syntax. What we are going to specifically cover in this lesson are the 4 different ways a function can be created. This syntax is the function declaration. We're declaring a new function with the function keyword. But let's look at the other 3 ways, and I've gone ahead and created them in the code so you can compare and contrast each way of creating a new function. The second way that you create a function that's generally taught in JavaScript 101 is a function expression. And by expression, we mean something to the right of the assignment operator, the equal sign. So we're declaring a variable, let blue be assigned to, and I always encourage people to say be assigned to versus be equal to, because when we're comparing a left and a right value, we use 2 or 3 equal signs, and then we can say is equal to because we're asking that question. When you see 1 equal sign, I'm begging you to say the assigned to. That will really help your mental math in terms of how this is working. We're declaring a new variable called Big Blue. We're assigning it to a function, and that function becomes an expression on the right-hand side of that equal sign. Now, this function doesn't have a name. It's called an anonymous function. You could put a function name here as well, but you very rarely do because you're assigning that function to this variable name. So if we had a function name there, we could run it with blue, or we could run it with Big Blue. Because we're using a function expression and that variable name takes on the function, we very rarely see a function name. I'm going to save that, and I'm going to look at these statements. They're the same 2 statements that I used in big red, only we're changing the color to blue. So when I run that function in the console, big blue, left, right, parenthesis, I'm running those 2 statements. So students often ask me, should I use? Which is better, a function declaration or a function expression? And it's a potato answer for the most part. It doesn't matter how you say it, it's still a potato. It doesn't matter how you declare your function, both functions. Function declaration syntax has the benefit of allowing you to run that function before it's created. So every once in a while, people like to put their functions, their helper functions at the very bottom of their script and run those functions throughout the script. Then you would have to use a function declaration because you can't use the big blue function until after it has been declared. So we've got this hoisting issue that applies to function declarations that hoists the big red function throughout the script to the top of the script and allows you to use it wherever you want, which is not true in the function expression. So function declarations do have that benefit. I also think they have the benefit of readability. I think by putting that function keyword as the first line in the statement, it just makes a function declaration very easy to read. However, it's very, very, very important that you be able to read function expressions because they really help you read other code and read the code in libraries, which may be written this way. Plus, if you understand the function expression syntax, then you understand functional programming better. You can pass a function as a value around in the code. So you can put a function any place where you would put an expression or a value, or you can pass it as an argument to another function. So that mentality is very important to JavaScript. Also, the function expression syntax is very similar to the arrow function syntax. In the arrow function syntax, we're creating a variable named Big Green, and assign it to, now look here, instead of having the function left, right, parenthesis, we pass in the arguments first. We define the parameters for that function first. When we have no parameters in these functions, it's just merely left, right, parenthesis, side by side. And then we use the arrow syntax instead of the function keyword. So first we pass in the parameters that we're defining, then we go ahead and say, now yield these statements in the function. So these two syntaxes are similar, very similar, in that we're using the assignment statement and we're identifying the parameters, and then we're going on into our function. So in my opinion, the function expression helps us then learn the new latest version of JavaScript's arrow function syntax. This is a function just like Big Blue was. And let's just try and run that just to be sure. Big Green, it's a function indeed, and it's changing now our size again to 3M, our color to green. I also like learning function expressions and arrow functions because they are very similar in syntax to the object method. Let's look at a function as an object method. So here I've defined a new object called colors. I'm assigning it to an object, a custom object. I can tell that because of the curly braces. Inside that custom object, I've got two properties, big yellow and big magenta. In each of these cases, I have assigned the value of the property to a function. In this case, it looks very much like a function expression, only instead of using the assignment statement when I'm assigning a function to a variable name, when you're inside an object and you're assigning a function to a property, you use a colon. After the property name, you always use a colon. And when the value is a single value, we call it a property. So I'll just create a property and assign it to my name. So we would call author a property because it's assigned to a single value. But when that property is assigned to a function, we call that property a method. Look, we're using the function keyword to create a method. So function and method are really synonyms. However, when we're inside an object, we typically call those properties that run a function method. And look at this syntax. This syntax is very similar to our function expression syntax. I'm declaring the property name, I'm declaring the value name, I'm assigning it to a function. I'm using a colon after the property name and assigning that property to a function. A comma separates all of our properties. And here is the same exact thing with a new property called Big Magenta, followed by the colon because every property is followed by a colon, and I'm using arrow syntax to create my function. Let's go ahead and save and run these two functions to do the exact same thing. They hit this Y paragraph, they change its style, they change its font size to 3Ms, and in each case, all they're doing is changing the color. So let's save and refresh, and let's look at our web page now. Let's look at colors.bigyellow, and let's run that function. And then let's look at colors.bigmagenta, and let's run that function. Those are the 4 ways we can create a function and the 4 ways they look in our JavaScript. As a function declaration, big red is a function declaration, or as a function expression, big blue is our function expression, or as an arrow function, big green is our arrow function, or as a method of an object. And in that case, we have to use the object dot, and then the method's name followed by the parentheses. And here's colors.bigmagenta. What I want you to see is that in each case, the function was run with parentheses after the function name. No, we haven't had to pass in any arguments yet because our functions were not created with any parameters. But we'll get to that in our JavaScript 101 series. That's the 4 ways functions look. Thank you for listening. See you in the next screencast when we will talk about when you run functions in testing, on system events, and also on user events. Thank you.